The JCRC, as many of you know, serves as the public affairs and community relations arms of our local organized Jewish community. We represent the Jewish Federation here in town and more than 100 organizations, synagogues, and schools to advocate not only for the needs and values of the Jewish community, but also for the well-being of everyone in the region, including the most vulnerable. The JCRC is primarily focused on government relations, advocating for Israel, combating anti-Semitism, strengthening ties with other communities, Holocaust, education, and of course, security. Tonight, after I introduce our fantastic guests and we hear from each of them about how they are working with the Jewish community to fight against anti-Semitism and keep us all safe, I'm going to open up the discussion for all of you to participate. So I'm going to be moderating. You're stuck with me for the evening, but if you want to ask a question, just put it in the chat. I will then call on you and you can unmute yourself to get as many questions as possible, though please try to be succinct. So without further ado, first let me introduce Malik Aziz, the Chief of Police of the Prince George's County Police Department since March of last year. And Chief Aziz began his career with the Dallas Police Department as a patrol officer in 1992. Prior to moving to Prince George's County, he served as the deputy chief there since 2007. Chief Aziz has a BA in criminology and criminal justice from the University of Texas at Arlington and an MBA from the University of Dallas. He is also a graduate of the Police Executive Research Forum Senior Management Institute for Police and the FBI's National Academy. Dwayne Preston is Deputy Chief of the Bowie Police Department, who began a career in law enforcement with the Prince George's County Police Department in 1990. Deputy Chief Preston served in that department for more than 20 years. In 2012, he joined Bowie Police and in his current position, oversees daily operations and many projects, including its communication center, its strategic plan, oversight of internal investigations, and importantly, implementation of its body-worn camera program, which we hear a lot about these days. Deputy Chief Preston is a proud graduate of DeMatha Catholic High School. He obtained his BA in business from Bowie State University and his MBA from the University of Maryland University College. Meredith Weisel currently serves as the Regional Director at the ADL's Washington, D.C. Regional Office. She runs everything there, the organization's legislative advocacy, community engagement and coalition partnerships, law enforcement training, incidents response, and media and communications outreach. And she has some sort of breaking news for us this evening since the ADL just came out with its 2021 audit, anti-Semitic audit report. Anyway, prior to that, she had my job. She served as the JCRC's Director of Maryland Government and Community Relations, where of course she advanced legislative priorities that focused on advocating for strengthening hate crimes laws, educating about anti-Semitism, and one of our most important pieces of work that we do is securing funding for houses of worship, schools, and child care centers at risk of hate crimes. So Meredith is an attorney who has spent decades engaged in public policy and community issues in the area. And finally, we have Eddie Askarati, who joined the Security Community Network, which we call SCN, last April as its Deputy Regional Security Advisor for the National Capital Region of the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington. And in this role, Eddie administers a security program that you all have to know about because it provides consultation, organizational assessments, training, and exercises in threat mitigation to Jewish organizations. In fact, his work helps protect schools, daycare centers, synagogues, camps, assisted living facilities, and other centers of Jewish life. Before joining SCN, Eddie retired as a master police officer down the road with the across the river with the Fairfax County Police Department in Virginia. He holds a bachelor's degree in business from Old Dominion University and attained rank of major in the U.S. Marine Corps. So that was a mouthful, and but worthwhile to introduce all of our guests this evening. What we're going to do, how we're going to sort of run this is I'm going to start with Chief Aziz and have each of these guests talk about sort of their agency and the role they play in fighting against anti-Semitism and all forms of hate, and how they're working every day to keep our communities safe. And then we'll go to Deputy Chief Preston, and then probably Meredith, and then Eddie. I was trying to save Meredith's report for last, but I think it might make sense to do it this way. So Chief Aziz, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and good evening to everyone on the call. I'll go down a few brief things. One thing that was left out in my bio that I'm very proud of is that I headed up security at Temple Emmanuel in Dallas, Texas, under Rabbi Stern for many years, and to make sure that our Jewish brothers and sisters there were safe each and every week. It was really a great experience for me, and I missed them dearly. I was just thinking about them a couple of days ago. So I want to say a few things. I think I have a couple of people on the call. I'm not so sure. I don't see their names, but Assistant Chief Hayes, who is my second in command, was on the call, I believe, and Deputy Chief Donna, who is over there he is right there. He's waving. I guess my name is showing, but that's Assistant Chief Vernon Hale. Deputy Chief Felipe Adano is on. He's over the Bureau of Investigations, and Deputy Chief James McCreary, he's over the Bureau of Patrol. If you guys may know.
Thank you. Thank you so much for introducing both of them. Yes, you got your whole team.
Good evening.
Yeah, Deputy Chief Adano and Deputy Chief Price. So I'll mention this later, but I'm just going to say just about 2 minutes worth of things that we've been doing. One of the things that we do is that we have constructed meetings. I see Rabbi Eli is on here, who is a very dear friend of ours.
Hi, Chief.
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. And we've been to his location, and we have met, and he's met all of our command staff. So the first thing in building trust in a procedural justice type of way is that we establish communication, and we have done that with the major out in his way with Coletti and all of my commanders. And also we've held a meeting, which I believe we're going to have that quarterly meeting with the various rabbis and leaders in the Jewish community. And we've had a very robust meeting just a couple of months ago this year. And so with that said, and how we keep you safe, now we actually document the intelligence that we receive for any type of hate crime here, and for 2021. And I would say one is too many. So we won't have zero, but one is too many. Last year, we had the swastika written on a car over in College Park, which alarmed the community there, and was brought to our attention by my good friend, the rabbi. And you can imagine the alarm that would take place in that location. But we've established and opened the lines of communication. We operate in a national intel sharing. Deputy Chief Price is here. He heads up our intelligence. He sits on the committee for the Major Cities Chiefs Association, which ties us directly into my counterparts with the FBI, which we normally get updated calls on any incident that happens across the nation if we believe that it will affect something here in Prince George's County or the greater region here, or the North Capital region. And we share intel inside of our New York operatives who has a different flow of information. And we disseminate that information to our officers here. We've disseminated that information to the locations across Prince George's County for frequent and routine patrol to make sure that a police officer from Prince George's County is visible, especially on or holidays inside of our Jewish community. And lastly, I'll say this before I pass it on, to educate our officers properly, to engage in a dialogue that's very meaningful for and establishes a partnership. I've been talking to the ADL about our command leadership program over at the Holocaust Museum, so that we could run our command staff as well as various other levels from officers, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, and majors through that process, so that they can get a firsthand view and understand the historical, perspectives that has occurred. And we constantly push out through our training and education division the training that goes along with some of the things that the ADL was offering us to get us properly educated, especially in patrol and the Bureau of Investigations. So those are a few things that we're doing to keep the Jewish community safe in Prince George's County, and to add value to our relationship. And although we had one incident before, and this year we haven't had any, and that's the way we want to keep it. So I would relinquish the floor there, but I'll be happy to expound on anything as the dialogue goes on.
Before I turn it over to Deputy Chief Preston, I just have one comment and then one question. First of all, Chief Aziz, can you turn your camera on? It was off and then it was on. Ta-da! There you go. That's okay. Thanks. Could you just give, maybe everybody in the community knows, but maybe they don't. When you're talking about how large is the Prince George's County department?
The Prince George's County Department, where we are slated to be almost 1,800. Right now, we are just close to 1,500, and we're in a hiring push right now to get us back up to full strength over a course of a few years. And we operate out of 8 patrol divisions, and those patrol divisions are strategically placed across our county, which incorporates the municipalities, the 24 municipalities that we work with in Prince George's County. So we have a direct relationship and we liaison with those municipalities, as well as the district, Montgomery County, and across into Virginia. And so we have a very diverse, the 500 square miles that we operate in is very vast, but with those 8 we're able to accommodate our residents.
Okay, thank you so much. Deputy Chief Preston, I also would like to find out sort of some of the work that you're doing in the community and keeping tabs on all forms of hatred and of course anti-Semitism, and how your police department is there, how they're helping in this effort to combat these type of incidents and hate.
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. And Deborah, I appreciate the opportunity to join this illustrious panel and to talk about a very important issue. Just some background information on the Bowie Police Department. Fairly new police department was established in 2006. But since that time, we've had a rapid growth where we now have an authorized strength of 67 sworn police officers, 19 civilian members to include a police dispatch staff. We serve a population of over 58,000 residents within the city of Bowie, city roughly over 18.5 square miles. So we have a great partnership with our community. That's one of the things that we pride ourselves on, is to be in tune with our community and be accessible. So we work hand in hand with the members of the community. Rabbi Weisman and his congregation, we work closely with them, as well as the Interfaith Action Coalition, which is a group that encompasses all of the churches within the city, to make sure that we serve the needs of the faith population. As I mentioned earlier, before we joined the call, we're in the planning process now of doing a security briefing to deal with active threats with the Interfaith Action Coalition. The tentative date for that is June 8th. So we're solidifying that. And once we have that information solidified, I'll make sure that that is shared with everyone here and the community at large. I do want to acknowledge a couple of people that I see on the call. One is Jill Hockman, who is the vice chair of our Public Safety Committee, and as well as a long-term friend and co-worker, Steve Morenstein. So, we're very much committed, as Chief Aziz mentioned earlier. Crimes committed against the Jewish community are unacceptable. in the city of Bowie. We did have the unfortunate incidents where the discriminatory leaflets were passed out on February 19th and the 24th. We have coordinated that with other law enforcement agencies that have similar events to be done within their jurisdictions. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to develop much more information that leads us to a suspect in those particular incidents. However, we remain committed and want to be open to the community to receive information and make sure that we continue to serve the needs of our community.
Thank you so much. Meredith, should I save you for last and go to Eddie right now? I think I will. Eddie, is that okay?
Sure.
And I'm calling you Eddie, so I hope that's all right. Like my boss,
that's
it's very informal.
When I was a police officer, it was Officer Eddie, so
Okay.
It's fine. That's the way I like it. Good evening, everyone. I apologize. I am looking at notes. I have been on the job. She said last April, but that's last April as in like 3 weeks ago. Okay, so I appreciate making it sound like it was a long time ago. I have been on the job for 3 weeks. I retired 3 weeks ago. That being said, SCN, I'm very happy to be a part of this. The last time I was on one of these briefings, I represented Fairfax County Police. So now I get to represent SCN in a similar meeting, which is a wonderful dichotomy there. As SCN, though, we are the safety and security organization for the Jewish community across North America. We provide safety assessments. We provide trainings. We provide briefings. We'll discuss emergency action plans. We do all of that kind of, we've actually included Stop the Bleed. So it's things there's things in there that we can add additional layers to. One of the things that I've learned about the company while I'm here is the great cooperation that we have with such a wide range of people. The Jewish Federation, the partnership that we have with the Federation of Greater Washington is phenomenal. And that's what makes it possible so that we can get to all the institutions. The laundry list that was said at the beginning of all the places that we go to is what we do. The only one that I heard missing was the Jewish services, social services. That's the only one you were missing. Everything else was pretty well covered. So I look forward to getting to know all of you. I know that SCN has had less communication with those of you in Prince George's County, since most of the work we do is in Montgomery County and in some parts of Northern Virginia. So we're looking to get out there. Robert Graves is my boss as the regional security advisor, and he's been a one-man show for a while. So he was very happy to get me on board so that we can, in fact, reach out and provide you additional, not competing, but additional resources to the great resources you're getting from your local police department. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. And Eddie was being self-effacing in terms of a lot of humility in terms of what SCN does. They do tremendous work, particularly for the Jewish community in terms of protecting us and in terms of training and in terms of assessments. And I know you have calls. Is it I think it's
once a week.
Once a week. I was going to say every week. It seemed like a lot. And also, as you remember, unfortunately, the incident in Colesville in Texas, and due to the training done by the SCN folks, they were able to extricate themselves from that situation. Specifically, your organization was key with that work. So anyway, now I can toss it off to Meredith. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And I know you have all sorts of information, disturbing information. So I will let you talk about your work, and then maybe we can get into some of the latest statistics that just came out showing me, I think it's a spike of 17% in Maryland and across the country, 34% spike in incidents, anti-Semitic incidents, but I'll let you take it away. That's what I could remember off the top of my head. And there's some real alarming stuff that is very relevant to the discussion tonight that I will make sure we get to. And I want everybody's questions, so please put your questions in the chat so you can ask this great panel anything that's on your mind broadly or about your community. Thanks, Meredith.
Thanks, Deb. So Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I know these are always very sobering meetings. So I'll say that, when we're talking about security issues, rise in anti-Semitism. And what I want to kind of do is go through just a little bit of a background on what ADL is, the Anti-Defamation League, just for anybody who's not familiar with a lot of the work that we have been doing, kind of what we're doing today, not just physically today meaning, here in 2022. And then I'll go do a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the audit of anti-Semitic incidents that we do every year. And it is literally hot off the presses this morning as of 6 a.m. I've had a little bit more time to digest it than probably some of you have, because I've been, going through the details the past few weeks. So I'll go through that. And just for way of background also, so ADL has 25 regional offices across the country, and my office covers the states of Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and the District of Columbia. So it's a very large region. We have some ADL offices that cover 1 state, some that cover 6 states. I cover 4. And it is very diverse, and we have a very large Jewish population in a lot of the areas, but we also have a lot of interfaith work that we do across the community. And so what I want to just do is, again, just by way of background, just for everybody who's not familiar. So ADL is it's a centuries-old leading anti-hate and civil rights organization. We have a dual mission. We fight the defamation of the Jewish people, essentially combating anti-Semitism, supporting the Jewish community, making sure the Jewish community feels safe and secure, but also working on a lot of other issues. And then the second part of our mission is securing justice and fair treatment for all. And part of that is, we really believe that hate that we see out there it's interrelated. One form of hate is not worse than the other. They are all equally serious and damaging, and they all have a real impact on the entire community. So whether we see an incident of anti-Black racism, of Islamophobia, of anti-LGBTQ, anti-Semitism, which is really what we're talking about tonight, it all has a ripple effect throughout the entire community, which is why we really believe it's so important to fight anti-Semitism, but also securing justice and fair treatment for all. And one of the reasons that we do a lot of that is we're a leading expert in extremism. So the audit, which I'll talk about, is put out by our Center on Extremism, and they essentially, we have analysts, I think it's about 25 or 30 staff that look at all aspects of extremism, everything from your garden variety, neo-Nazi, KKK, to, we'll talk about the Goyim Defense League, which was the flyering that happened in Prince George's County, to, other types of right-wing white supremacist groups, to some extremist groups on what we would call the left. So just any form of extremism, and so much of the extremism and extremist groups are rooted in anti-Semitism, and I'll explain what I mean just a little bit more about that. And look, the bottom line, and I've said this, actually this line, I think on all the security briefings, that unfortunately being on edge, being vigilant has very much become a part of the American Jewish experience here. And in the past few years, anti-Semitism has reached a high watermark, and I will talk exactly what I mean about that, the numbers with that. But what I want to say is, even before I get into the numbers, is the violence we've seen, and this will be reflective in the numbers. It's become very brazen assaults, I would say, from Jewish people being attacked in Times Square, like out in the open. We have continuously seen a lot of issues up in Brooklyn in the past few months. Now we're in 2022. We've seen synagogues in Jewish neighborhoods in Los Angeles attacked. We've seen what happened in Colleyville in Texas. Go back to even several years ago, when we had Charlottesville, where, extremists marched through the streets saying Jews will not replace us. We have the synagogue attack, Tree of Life in Pittsburgh. It is happening all over the place. The majority of the incidents are harassment and vandalism. So the good news is that the assaults are not as high, but they're still happening. And, people ask all the time, why is this happening? ADL, what do you know? Like, that's always a question I get from a reporter. Why the increase? Why the past 2 years? Look, there are a variety of reasons we could talk about. The bottom line is we have not seen a lot of our leaders, whether we're talking elected officials, community leaders, companies, they haven't been using their bully pulpits, I would say, for good. It's allowed a climate in which extremism, hatred, bigotry, conspiracy theories have flourished. And what we've seen, look, the past 5 years have been bookended by a lot of anti-Semitism in that. Charlottesville, as I mentioned, all the way up to the breach at the Capitol on January 6th to an insurrection. So it's understandable, which is why meetings like this are so important. The level of anxiety is rising, and concerns for communal safety is on everybody's mind. And the bottom line is the findings of the audit that I'll talk about in just a second, they reinforce the need for what I would call a whole of society approach to combat anti-Semitism and other forms of hate and bigotry. So whether it's something on social media, whether it's an attack on a synagogue, whether it's flyering, anti-Semitism, we need to say it has no place in our communities. We need our leaders to step up that this doesn't continue to gain a foothold in many different aspects, whether it's on social media or in real life. And with that, the sobering data is that since 1979, ADL has been conducting an annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents. We compile this information from victims, from law enforcement. So a lot of our law enforcement agencies report information directly to us, community leaders, partner organizations like the JCRC, the federations. We work very, very closely with SCN. We have a national partnership with them, and Robert Graves and I have been working together for many years. I'm glad to see Eddie on board, also shifting his life. This is a great retirement job for you. We compile all the data, and the accounts sometimes are supplemented just for, to understand where the data comes from. Media reports, as I said, are Center on Extremism, and it gives a snapshot of this problem nationwide. And this is the highest year on record. So in 2020 or 2021 was the highest year on record, which some of us actually kind of saw a little bit of the writing on the wall earlier last year around this time, actually really in May, when we saw a huge uptick in anti-Semitic incidents related to a lot of anti-Israel rhetoric, related to issues that were happening, over between Israel and Hamas over in the Middle East, and it caused an uptick here. And the number, which is very jarring, is 2,717 anti-Semitic incidents throughout the United States. That's an average of more than 7 incidents per day. Think about that, 7 incidents per day. That's alarming. And that represents, you were right, Deb, it is a 34% increase from last year, or from 2020. And 2020 was a very high year. So, that is something that is concerning. We've seen attacks against Jewish institutions or against our JCCs, our synagogues, things like that were up 61%. K through 12 schools had an increase of 106% in 2021. And college campuses rose close to 21%. So as I said, though, most of this, it was incidents of harassment. That was up about 43%, and vandalism went up about 14%. Assaults, though, that's the one, even though it's a smaller number, it is a more serious incident. In other words, it involves some sort of person-to-person physical violence usually, and that increased 167%. So even though the incidents were lower, the amount that actually happened from a percentage standpoint, so it went to a total of 88 incidents nationwide from 33 in 2020. So these are definitely some things that are alarming. And here in our region, last year when I got the numbers for 2020, it was jarring because I was like, oh my gosh, Maryland in particular had the highest number on record. That can't happen again. Well, clearly I was wrong, because it's now the highest year on record, up from 2020. So in Maryland specifically, there were about 55 incidents reported. And again, I want to say this and take this with a grain of salt, in the sense that this is what's reported. We know a lot goes underreported also. And so that is one of the things that we need to keep in mind. Why are people not reporting? Also, what are they concerned about? And our data is only as good as what's reported, but it's also the data drives policy, which is why we want the numbers, as sobering as I said they are. So again, Maryland, 55 incidents, 17% increase from 2020, and 175% increase from 2019. So from 2019 to 2021 was a huge uptick. And it's the second year in a row, not a number Maryland wants to be at, but the 11th highest in the country So, I don't want to be in there. I want to be at the bottom. And it's not just because of the percentage of the Jewish population. It's also just some of the dynamic that we're seeing. And I can give you a full breakdown of, what the numbers are in there, and I can certainly talk into the detail. But I know we're talking about Prince George's County, but I will tell you, DC was also very high. Virginia went down like a tiny, tiny little bit, and North Carolina, which I also cover, had the largest increase from a percentage standpoint of 131% increase down in North Carolina. And so, this is something that we need to understand. And the bottom line is, and then I'll pause, is the audit doesn't measure all the anti-Semitic incidents, as I said, particularly those that are on the internet. We see a lot on social media that is not reported because there's not always what we would say, I'll put this in quotes, a victim. And sometimes people just brush it off. And so we really do want to make sure that we're looking at the way that is perpetrating, and particularly a lot of the conspiracy theories that are throughout there. And look, this is really deeply disturbing. This is hard data to look at, and to understand that anti-Semitism really still remains a clear and present danger in the United States. And we really need our society, members of Congress, our governors, our city council leaders, our mayors, everybody needs to really be, I would say, laser focused. That's the word I would use, that we know that this happened. And I'm happy to sort of break down the data, and, particularly questions that I've gotten a lot today are specifically about last May during the Israel-Hamas conflict. So Deb, I'll pause there because I think that kind of gives an overview, and then you let me know what kind of questions.
Okay, I have some questions, but because I'm not going to take the moderator's prerogative here, I'm actually going to go to Rabbi Weissman, who is very well known in the community. And I think thank you for writing out the question in the chat. I'm actually going to, if you could unmute yourself, and if you could ask sort of your question. I think it actually doesn't have to be targeted toward Meredith or Eddie, but it could be. But if you want to talk a little bit about, if you could just ask your question, that would be terrific. And thank you for gathering everybody here. I know I know Ron beat you up. I shouldn't use that word, but I know Ron was on you to invite as many people as possible. So thank you so much for the big turnout.
Ron and I had an understanding. It's always a pleasure to work with you all.
We all have an understanding with Ron.
Ain't that the truth? And he's not even here to defend himself tonight. My question was in the form of an observation and looking for some validation to find out if we're onto something, or we're ahead of a curve, or if it's just a unique circumstance. But over the course of the last 2 years under COVID, my sense as a rabbi in this community, at least, was that there was a significant uptick in the community in general about interest in Judaism as a educational idea, and also potentially for the purpose of conversion, that, at least in my experience, seemed to measure the uptick in hate rhetoric in general. And I ascribe them both in my own head to the fact that we had a lot more time to sit around contemplating our navels and trying to decide what really matters for us as individuals in our lives when we could and sit in traffic to get to work every day. And I think a lot of people took it in positive directions. And I wonder how much of the uptick over the last couple of years will start to dissipate now that we're getting back into the real world and people get back to a more normal circumstance. The second part of my question was that here, in response to that observation, and also because of the work we're doing in the community in general with our faith partners on larger issues, we've started to direct more of our programming outward to the general community in terms of informational programming about Jews and Judaism in Israel, to increase understanding, to increase awareness, so that we can be proactive in trying to avoid issues and create new realities, rather than having to be negative and responsive to situations. And I was directing it to Meredith and Eddie because I was wondering if we've seen evidence like this from other places of either of the phenomenon, and whether we're onto something here, or whether this is something that needs more time and more work to be investigated.
So I'm going to answer this in a couple of ways. So one, it wasn't just an increase during the past 2 years during the pandemic. So some of the increases started jumping. I'm just looking at a chart over here for a couple of my notes. We started seeing from 2015 to 2016 a huge jump. And then 2017 became even higher. We saw a little bit of a dip in 2018. And then it sort of just has been consistently up. Like I said, 2020 was a little bit lower than 2019, but like it was, peanuts, so to speak. It wasn't a whole lot of a difference. So it really is, that's why I said it's kind of bookended by maybe even 6 years, going back to 2016 when some of this started. Now, the types of incidents have definitely changed a little bit, in the sense last year, a big part of the incidents were related to a lot of anti-Israel rhetoric, anti-Zionism, very specific during the May conflict. We had a huge number of incidents and stuff. So I don't know that, people's interest in Judaism, whether people are converting or not, will necessarily change that, but what I will say is what we have realized, we have a lot more work in the education space. And I don't mean just education K through 12 schools or college campuses. I mean education of the community, period. And we've started even getting requests for corporations as part of DEI efforts. So their diversity, equity, and inclusion to include, which it should be included, as anti-Semitism. What does that mean? Because anti-Semitism, the difference it is from some of the other forms of discrimination, which, like I said, all hate is equally serious and damaging, but anti-Semitism can sometimes be more nuanced than other types of discrimination that we see out there. So it's, you see a swastika, most people know that something like that is anti-Semitism. It's very clear. We know, particularly if you've studied the Holocaust, and what that symbol means. But when you see something like, somebody use what we consider an anti-Semitic trope or a stereotype, they don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. They don't realize it perpetuates anti-Semitism. So when somebody starts saying, and we see elected officials do it a lot more, Jews control the media, Jews control Wall Street, Jews control Congress. All of those kind of phrases, definitely perpetuate other forms of anti-Semitism. And that is the one thing a lot of people just don't know. I just gave a presentation to one of our local universities to talk about this to 70 of the administrators, including the president of the university, because they didn't even know how to handle it on college campus. That's why I said, as an example, like, what are the tropes? Like, what does that mean when somebody says that? Why is that hurtful? A lot of people in the Jewish community know, but I don't expect everybody to always know that. So the education of that, we have failed as that. We as a collective community, I don't mean we as ADL, we as JCRC, we as you as Rabbi Weissman, we just as a community have not done a good job with that. And extremists have taken a hold of it, and then it perpetuates these conspiracy theories. So things like the flyering that happened in Prince George's County from the Goyim Defense League, it says every aspect of COVID is the Jewish agenda. Well, their most recent flyering, which we should be very grateful Maryland has been immune to the past 2 weeks, has been all about Disney. Disney is the Jewish agenda. Their new flyers, so to all of the law enforcement on here, if that shows up in the community, please call me immediately, because that is the new flyer. I can actually send you all an example, and it literally is the same flyer they use, but now they've changed it to Disney is the Jewish agenda. And there's all these executives with Jewish stars on their forehead. So that's a whole conspiracy theory. And there are some in the community who see that and they're like, oh, okay, no big deal. But that does cause fear and angst in the community, and it's anti-Semitic. So we as a collective community have to do a better job of education in general with people within the Jewish community and outside the Jewish community. It's got to be across the board. What does anti-Semitism mean? And that is something we have realized we've just, as a society, have not done as good of a job. So that's why I said it was a little bit of a nuanced answer to your question, but that's, I think, where we should be going and how to fix some of this.
Thank you, Meredith. There's a short question that is an important question that Helene Kershaw put in the chat. I live in Bowie. If I want to report an anti-Semitic incident, who do I call? Not Ghostbusters. So Deputy Chief, who does she call? I mean, that's a real concrete question, and I know you have a good answer.
Sure. And that's quite simple. You know, as I mentioned before, we have our own dispatch. And so for non-emergency calls for service, where your life is not being threatened, you know, we ask that you call our non-emergency number to report that, and we will send an officer out. That phone number is 240-544-5700. I will also put that number in the chat. But any kind of incident where you feel your life is threatening or being threatened, you know, we ask people to call 911.
Okay. And also, Chief Aziz, is there, same thing, if it happens in the county, who should people be calling? Is there a liaison, somebody that we have so many synagogue members here, Chabad members here on the call, who should they be reaching out? And then sort of a follow-up is, what steps should synagogues be taking? We're talking about being proactive versus reactive. So one would be hire SCN, call the ADL, have the JCRC come in, but what steps should synagogues, in terms of protecting themselves, do you advise? Chief Aziz, are you on here?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah,
Great.
but number
Thanks.
one is, I'll repeat what Deputy Chief Preston said. I think he said it well. But if it is handled in Prince George's County PD, and it can go through our 911 system, or we can reach out through our cops officers who can readily come to your location, who are, if it's not an emergency. But Deputy Chief Price is here, and Deputy Chief Ardano, it depends on what it is, they'll handle or do the follow-up on different incidents for either hate crimes or the follow-up investigation. But let me say what I said earlier about what should we be doing. We should be doing the things I outlined earlier. We should be meeting with the leaders of the synagogues or temples or centers. We should formulate regular meetings. We should be advising our officers to make contact with locations or anyone who is serving the community for information. And we should also get security assessments wherever we are, with whatever police department it is, to look at our facilities, either in a police way or a security way, whoever you may contract with for security, to give advisements upon how do we properly secure the place. And as we've seen around the nation and some of the horrific incidents that have happened over the last couple of years and longer, that we make sure that we understand what is an active shooter, and how do we respond to that. And because everyone seems to forget what will happen in a real crisis, and we need that to be cemented into the mindset of how we will respond. So I would say that refresher training, just the small, a few minutes or even an hour of talking about what will be the response and what will happen, not just for the religious leader, the rabbi, or the leader or director of a center. It is for everyone to know what will be the action. So I would say, let's continue to shore up those things, have meetings, build trust, and build the proper exchange of communication, information, so we can move on with the proper investigations.
I will give a little bit, thank you so much, Chief. I'll give a very short, brief plug for the JCRC, which all of the synagogues and schools should be aware of. We secured this year $5 million, the Protection Against Hate Crimes grant, as well as $2 million from the Maryland Center for School Safety. So these are grants that are available. They will be, I will be sending out information about them, of course, and that those grants, those applications are in June and July. I actually spoke to someone earlier today trying to get an exact date on when those applications and notice of funding will be available. I don't have those yet. And of course, you all know that the Federation provides the nonprofit security grant programs. So there are many steps to go through. I know SCN does a lot of seminars on the availability of the federal government money. And so that's something that you should all be aware of. And I mean, nothing replaces the eyes of law enforcement, but having these sort of hard funding, mechanisms in place is also very important, and things that you should all take advantage of. So, and I send out information about that. I probably fill up everybody's inbox. In a very different way, Mendel Fogel, I will let you, if you want to talk about, there is an empowerment program that you wanted to raise. So please go ahead and talk a little, briefly about your program. And then I think we're going to have to wrap this up. Although there's one question I want to ask Meredith. Eddie, did you want to say something before?
I wanted to clarify one thing you said earlier. You do not hire SCN. We're free. Thanks to the Federation. Thanks to the partnership with ADL. Thanks for all the other. We're free. We borrow. Take our resources. We provide those assessments also. I bring the law enforcement background. I'm a certified crime prevention specialist from the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's the same stuff. I can apply it in Maryland. So I put some contact information in there, contact the security desk, and we will get that information.
Thank you. Thank you. So now, do you want to talk a little bit about the Krav Maga empowerment program that you're running?
Deb, do you want me to answer Jill's question first, or you want to do that after?
Did I miss Jill's question?
Yeah.
Go for it. Well, no, I promised her that she could talk about this. So.
Okay, yeah, I can talk about that question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You want me to do it now?
Sure.
Okay, so there's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is no, anti-Semitism. So in the sense that when you look at anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic incidents, it's based on religion-based hate crimes. So hate crimes in general, and I'm looking at just some of the data from 2020 from the FBI. So when we look at it, reported hate crimes targeting the Black community rose substantially, about a 43% increase. The AAPI community rose also a huge number during COVID. And reported hate crimes targeting the Jewish community made up nearly 60% of all religion-based hate crimes. So it's not that you can necessarily compare it's religion-based hate crimes versus race or ethnicity and gender. So it's very different. So that's why we do a separate audit on anti-Semitic incidents. So they are very alarming, the numbers. I mean, the number of incidents targeting the Black community went from was about 2,755 incidents in 2020, and I just gave you the data for anti-Semitic incidents was well over 2,000 also. So it is comparable if you want to compare numbers to numbers, but again, it is slightly different when we're looking at it the way the hate crimes data actually comes out. But there, as I said, we're not trying to compare it, and for policymakers, it should not be, oh, the oppression Olympics, you had more than I do. We have to look at it from a more whole of society approach and stuff. And, there were issues against the AAPI community that were higher than almost any other incident during COVID, because people, were blaming the Asian American community, saying it was all their fault. So you have to kind of look at it from a larger perspective. So Jill, I hope that answers your question. So it is comparable if you want to look numbers to numbers. There are definitely, as I said, incidents against the Black community and versus the Jewish community, or the white presenting Jewish community, because I also don't acknowledge, we obviously have Jews of color. And so that is comparable numbers to numbers. But again, it's, it depends on how you're looking at the data.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Meredith. So do you want to talk a little bit about the program that you're going to be running? Let me see the name of your program. I know you sent us an email about it. Mendel?
Yes. So thank you so much, Deborah.
Sure.
Just very briefly, first of all, thank you all so much for putting this all together. And I attended the last meeting as well with Chief Aziz and others. And I actually posted about that meeting on Facebook. And I just wanted to mention that the very fact that I would even, someone even sees that on social media, for example, brings awareness that we're already taking steps to take care of things. And that itself could already be a catalyst to people knowing that we're taking care of things, and that's already a reason to reduce things. But just wanted to mention, this wasn't even my idea. Community members suggested this and put this all together. There's a local Jewish Krav Maga instructor, Brian from Watchdog Krav Maga, and this is not like an active shooter drill or any one of those things. It's just a small self, personal defense empowerment measure. We put together this program, just a Krav Maga group session, one for men, one for women, one for children. It's in PG County within the city limits of Laurel, and it's coming up on May 15. So I can put the information to that in the chat. It's just a small measure for people to feel more empowered, on a personal level. And with all this in mind, but, not mentioning too much the fact that, we want to have some security and safety from anti-Semitism, but that's kind of the backbone behind it. But it's being more branded as just a positive empowerment for each individual.
Thank you so much. I think I'm gonna wrap this up, and I just want to keep in mind a few points. So number one seems to be education, and I know that the ADL, I know our law enforcement officers, and SCN, and for sure the JCRC, we do a tremendous amount of education with leaders inside school systems. So we have to keep that up. There's also funding resources, and then there's also security resources. So there are, the increase is alarming, and it continues to be. And if they come after one community, if they come after the Black community, the Asian community, the Jewish community, all forms of hate is something that we have to stamp out. And that's why we're all on this call. And we are lucky in this community to have the support of law enforcement, and to have the ADL working with JCRC and working with SCN to sort of combat this together in a collaborative effort. So I want to thank all of you. We had a huge turnout, so I'm grateful for that, and for everybody who helped put this together. Thank you to my colleague Lisa as well. And that wraps it up. So unfortunately, we're probably gonna have more of these meetings, but let's try to work together so the numbers do turn around. So